Okay, so I'm just going to provide a brief overview of today's business. The committee will consider two proposals for statutory rules subject to assembly procedure. We are going to receive oral evidence from the Department for Infrastructure Rivers Agency regarding further implementation of the Reservoirs Act Northern Ireland 2015, which will be in closed session. We're going to consider 3 statutory rules not subject to assembly procedure and consider 7 proposals for statutory rules not subject to assembly procedure. So just remind anybody that's in the public gallery, and we welcome Carmen today to the committee who's on work experience with Peter. So we just, anybody who's in the public gallery, just to keep your mobile devices muted and just that no recordings or photographs are to be taken. Hopefully, Carmen, you'll not be put off politics after today. And members, if you're content, we're going to proceed through agenda as follows. So apologies, we just have an apology from Deputy Chair John Stewart. And then we have Nicola and Mark joining us online. Declarations of interest remind members that they're obliged to declare any relevant financial or other interests which might reasonably be thought by others to influence their approach to the matter under consideration. Any members who have interest to declare in relation to today's business should do so now or when the particular matter arises during the meeting. So does any members have any interest that they wish to declare? No, I have one. It's just obviously we're going to be touching on yesterday's concurrent meeting, which is relation to the A5, and my husband's family are landowners along the route. Okay, chairperson's business. So yesterday obviously we had our joint concurrent meeting with the DERA committee just in relation to the A5. Unfortunately, ourselves as Infrastructure Committee, we had to leave the meeting early and go into the chamber for the Infrastructure Minister's statement. So, members who were present, do you want to add anything to what was discussed yesterday at the meeting? We had the UFU and we had NIEA officials up. NIEA officials were sort of detailing their remit in terms of what the constraints are, how they operate in terms of planning. Theirs is an advisory role, obviously. And then we had UFU with a farmer from Oma who was detailing his experiences so far of the road project itself, and indeed UFU were pointing out some of the difficulties that there exists for some of the landowners along the route. So does any members have anything they want to add in relation to yesterday's meeting?
Just say I think it was a useful meeting. Obviously there's a lot of concerns that still exist. You know, I think we heard it directly from particularly the second briefing. Is there any plans for this committee, any briefings planned, you know, going forward in relation to the A5 or what?
So obviously at the minute with the court case ruling, it's going to be quite difficult to know what we do going forward until we have that ruling. So I suppose we're waiting until that comes and then what we're going to do. But I mean, we can take forward some of the things that were discussed yesterday. So there was 2 things I sort of felt that maybe we could pick up on. One of them was yesterday in the session we heard about the no of one agricultural building that is set to be demolished as a result of where the route goes through. But I had asked during the meeting around what work or scoping out has been done in relation to farm operations that have to change as a result of the route, which is a wee bit more difficult, I suppose, to try and ascertain. But I wanted to just tie that up to make sure, has DFI done any plans around that or looked at that, and ask what other buildings there may be along that route that may have to change regarding planning, because farm businesses have to change how they do things as a result of the vesting and where the route now goes. So that was one of the things that I picked up on, that we can maybe ask our members content that we just check in on in relation to that. Yeah. And the other thing was just that we engage with the DERA committee again to establish whether the committee intends to write to DERA to ask whether special circumstances can be considered in relation to single farm payment, because that has been an issue obviously with the vesting, and the timescales of when farmers may have knew around that and that sort of thing. So our members content with that, because there won't be that leeway, and if you've got half an acre, you're out, you can lose your whole single farm payment, which would be a huge problem. Yeah.
Just confirming what the action is there, Chair. Is that us writing to DAERA? Is that us writing?
No, that's us writing to the committee to see if they are going to
the DAERA
check
committee?
in. Yeah. That's us writing to cause it's not our remit in terms of DAERA, but it is something just connected loosely, obviously, to the vesting, and then what happens around their single farm payments. So it's just to check if the committee are going to be doing that. Sorry, Mark, you were looking in.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. Obviously, the focus is on the roads end of things, but then in terms of the planning aspect, I think it might be good to seek some clarity from the department on that, specifically around applications for replacement buildings.
Yeah.
I know you can't legislate or draw a policy on the basis of an individual application or query, but there are general questions there I think we could be asking and should be getting answers to, to see what sort of flexibility can be afforded, not just in this case, but in others.
Yeah.
And then another point, we could come to this actually in correspondence, so I don't want to leapfrog, but it is, I suppose, connected to yesterday's meeting, and that's in correspondence today. We have an answer, and that was on compensation payments for historical road projects. And you can see really the tables contained in that correspondence demonstrate the length of time that it's getting. Well, for claims to be submitted, they aren't often submitted until after the work is done. Which is going to prolong uncertainty. We don't know when the work's going to start. Never mind trying to hazard a guess as to when it's going to be done. But I mean that's going to, I suppose, so that uncertainty is going to exist for a long time, it would appear.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, Mark, was there something specific that you wanted just to check in relation to the payments with the A5, or are you just highlighting that?
Yeah, just highlighting, I suppose. I mean, the representatives there from UFU yesterday talked about the uncertainty and the need for certainty for farmers as to what compensation they might be entitled to.
Yeah.
When the evidence we've received in that correspondence shows that most of them won't know that until they submit their claim, which is more often than not after the work is done. So that could be another 10 years away.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I suppose whenever you look at the road project in itself in the lifetime, and the fact that landowners can't claim for disturbance and things like that, it will be a long, slow progress, and that's if farmers can cope and sustain with that for that length of period of time as well. So and I totally agree with you in terms of the planning, whether in terms of that replacement dwelling side of things, whether there will be any flexibility or leeway. We haven't had any answers to that. Yesterday, I suppose it was a bit worrying to hear that people will have to go through the same process, and we know how long the planning system takes. So I think it's important that we just try and get some clarity around that issue, Mark. So thanks for raising that. Cahill, were you looking in?
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. I'm sorry I missed the meeting yesterday, but I suppose for ourselves from this committee point of view, and I mean, but I didn't get it. For me personally, I mean, I'd like to see the meeting, obviously the minutes of the two meetings now. There has been two, yeah. I know the first one was that, and I've some of the ideas in terms of, we just need to see the conversations and the minutes of those meetings to see exactly where we can take it forward, because we might have to meet, some people ourselves, even though they're not the remit of this committee, to have conversations, because whilst all we can do whilst the case is live at the minute, try and engage with as many groups as possible to see. I've heard some of the things that the challenges are, Chair, but you mentioned other things the other day, and NEA was in yesterday. So, we're kept up to date. One, the those two meetings already was there, the minutes of them for all the committee. You were there, I wasn't, so I'd just like to read them for myself. And other asking questions to DAERA, other outstanding issues that's been raised with them that we can help in moving forward, because it probably was a wee bit rushed yesterday because we had the statement in the chamber, and we're not really getting at it. We're leaving it to DAERA as the lead committee, but clearly there's issues for ourselves. We don't want to interfere because it's a live process, but still there might be a wee bit of stuff we can be doing ourselves. But it's just to get a better understand what's the main issue being raised. I know some of them, but our role as a DFI committee and what we can do to move the process, or have a wee bit of insight into how we can move the process forward ourselves from a committee point of view, you know.
Yeah. So the meeting that we had before, which was November time.
Long time back.
November we had the first concurrent meeting with DAERA. The minutes, the Hansard of that, I think was included in the packs that went out this week. Back, so then obviously we will have the meeting updated for those who weren't there this week to have a look at. Do you want to check in to see what issue? I mean,
NAE was there yesterday. I mean, I know there's farming issues, land issues, and all that, which is grand. Then it ties into the planning side, which is our side of things. So clearly identify what our issue, how we can work with them. We've had 2 briefings already, and we understand exactly some of the stuff. But it's actually our role how we can move it forward ourselves.
So I think the main thing here is with planning, and with that there is a concern around the ammonia and with replacement agricultural dwellings and things like that, and sheds that need to be replaced obviously on a farm to help with their operation. I suppose that is one of the main concerns that you're hearing. Obviously then the vesting and then the payment.
Our responsibility is to DFA,
So Cathal, I suppose you'll see the minutes once we have them. Once we'll maybe include the minutes in the meeting pack. You can take a look at them, and if there's anything else that you want to raise out of that, we can certainly do that. But remember, are you content with that approach, Cathal?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
So,
Keith.
Chair, just to come in, I would, in the opinion of right to the Minister, this is a DFI project.
Yeah.
DFI is building the road. Obviously, there's a court case. Appreciate that. But if that goes through, we'll be building the road, or DFI will build the road. So I would like to know what joint meetings has been held on site to support farmers. And that's, whenever I say joint, DFI, DAERA, everybody in that project seems to be getting support, even the badgers, apart from the farmers, and they have the most to lose. But they seem to be getting the least information. It doesn't take much, a public meeting or a bit of information or a liaison officer on the ground, as was discussed yesterday. So what joint meetings has been held, I suppose, is a question. Who's on the ground advising all these people? And DFI needs to put their arm around DAERA and say, you need to help these guys, because this is going to be these farmers are going to be talking about this in 10 years. I've seen that on the Markerfell bypass. This is not a 3-year, 4-year build.
Yeah.
It'll be 5 years after that, and it's evident in the figures there. So I would like to know what the Minister is going to do. The Minister is ultimately doing this project. She needs to be bringing DFI or DAERA on board to put her arm around them to get support for agriculture industry. People doesn't realise the impact this is going to have.
Yeah.
Well, sure, that's the kind
I've seen it at first hand.
I wasn't at the meeting. That's the kind of conversation.
Yeah.
I'm only saying our remit.
And Mark's correct.
I'm not saying I don't know what was.
That one case, that one individual, I don't know who it is. That one case is going to cost millions of pounds to settle.
Yeah.
Because if that individual has a building and he or she can't replace it, that's loss of business.
Yeah.
So you either look at a possible relaxation of the plan. I don't know how you do that, but that's going to cost millions of pounds.
I know that particular case because it is a constituent of mine, and that particular area has been vested, and there is a loss of crop in the intervening period of time, and yet there's no time scale of when exactly that agricultural building is going to be knocked down. So in that period of time,
there's cost ongoing immediately.
Absolutely, yeah.
From crop.
100%, and I don't disagree with you. I don't even know the case. All I'm saying is the remit of this committee, and that's fair enough. That's a fair question to ask. 100%. That's all I'm asking them now.
So happy enough.
Agreeing or disagreeing.
Happy enough. We write to the Minister in relation to the joint meetings that are happening with DAERA.
Correct.
And
on the ground, out in public.
Yeah, so DFI and DAERA in terms of the joint meetings that they are having on the ground, and about the liaison officer as well, which I should say officers, that would be needed to support people on the ground as well. And then you're happy that we write to the department as well in terms of other buildings around the planning aspect, which Mark had brought up, whether there will be leeway around replacement of agricultural dwellings through the planning system, and whether they have scoped out, done any exercise to find out if there are any other buildings which may need replaced as a result of agricultural operations having to change as a result of the route. And then we're also happy that we write to the committee for DERA just to check in to see whether they are checking up whether there will be special circumstances for the single farm payments, just so that we know that in the background, because it is related to the vest and stuff. So is everybody content with that?
I think just certainly as well to emphasise, the lack of communication. I think that farmers and rural dwellers are feeling on the ground from this department and from DERA as well. I think could just be highlighted. That certainly was evident yesterday during the various presentations. Yeah.
We'll highlight that in the letter to the Minister and reflect that in that letter going to her, if that's okay. Agreed, yeah. Okay, thank you. I also just wanted to raise, I'd seen a story which was a bit concerning. Obviously last week we had been out at the Harbour Commissioner's office in Belfast, but this is, I suppose, one of the emerging issues is I'd seen in relation to Portster Castle Rock area where the river bans Barmouth. They give evidence to the council there, the Harbour Commissioner down there give evidence to the council that they're really, really concerned of ecological and economic impact. The Barmouth is collapsing there, and they're very, very concerned what that will mean, because obviously we know that there is a train track there. There are obviously not just leisure happening there, but there's a beach there. There's a whole load of stuff in terms of golf courses, everything there, and I would be very, very concerned if that Barmouth does actually collapse and nothing has been done from a DFI point of view to try and support the Harbour Commissioner there in terms of what work needs to be done. So if you're content that we write to the Minister just in relation to that to find out what engagement has taken place with the Harbour Commissioner down there in Coleraine, and find out what plans there are to try and support the Harbour Commissioner with that, because I think it will be a huge impact for that area if you're content.
Yeah, much so.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on now to the draft minutes. At page 5, you'll see the draft minutes of proceedings of the meeting on the 28th of May 2025. So I'm just seeking agreement that members are content that the minutes are a true and accurate reflection of the meeting on the 21st of May 2025. If so, I'll sign the minutes now. You content?
Yep.
I think you'll all agree we enjoyed the Harbour Commissioner visit. And it was very interesting as well. Item 5 is matters arising. So does any members have any matters arising from the previous meeting? No? Okay, then correspondence at page 18. Oh, sorry.
What did we agree last week after the conversation with Alistair Beggs? Do you remember? It wasn't clear. Did we agree on an outcome after that or not?
Right.
Yeah, we did.
We agreed to write and get more clarification.
Fair enough. Couldn't remember that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you. Agreed. Yeah.
Because we'd asked for the terms of reference and that type of thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Content, yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, correspondence. At page 18 you'll see the correspondence memo. At page 32 there's correspondence from the Department for Infrastructure in response to a request for an update on the outcomes from the series of roundtable discussions on regional planning once completed. So are members content with the response, or do you need more information at this moment in time? You content? Okay. Page 27 is correspondence from the Department for Infrastructure in response to the committee's request for further detail on how the department intends to engage with stakeholders on Hill Street pedestrianisation and how this work will be progressed. So I'm seeking agreement that the committee write to the department requesting an update on the outcomes of the discussions between officials and stakeholders, including the Cathedral Quarter bid, the frontiers on Hill Street and Gordon Street once complete, and then for a list of stakeholders. I think it might also be interesting to try and scope out the costs in relation to that. My understanding was that this scheme was to be 5K, which in the grand scheme of things is a very, very minuscule amount of money, which would have massive impacts for that area. So we're obviously going back out to consult with people again. So I just want to scope out how much this will now cost, if the department has done any further costings on this, and whether that cost of 5,000 has went up. So are you content with that?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. At page 29, you'll see correspondence from the Department for Infrastructure informing the committee of the Minister's intention to launch a consultation towards the end of June on policy proposals which could form part of the Rail and Transport Bill. So just want to seek agreement to schedule an oral briefing with departmental officials once an advance copy of the consultation is available. Are you content? Yeah? At page 32, you'll see correspondence from the Minister for Education in response to the committee request for further information on what specific initiatives are being considered by the Department of Education to improve the safety of school children. So obviously this week we had a positive announcement in relation to the Infrastructure Minister's intention to bring forward legislation in relation to school buses. It was a very poignant debate in the Assembly Chamber, and you know, the families that were represented as well, one of which was from my own constituency. And I just want to pay tribute to the families that came up. It was a hard day for them, and I want to thank them for their work and also bringing attention to this. But I think it's important as a committee that we do see where this legislation is going to go to from now on. So I just want to seek agreement that we write to the Minister to ask for timescales around bringing forward this legislation, if you're content with that, to see what that may look like. Because I think, you know, a commitment has now been made. So we now need to ensure that we've a very short mandate. So we need to make sure that the legislation does actually come forward now to this committee for scrutiny. So are you content? Okay, thank you. At page 38, you'll see correspondence from the Department of Finance in response to a committee request for detail of the timescales for the payment of compensation to landowners subject to compulsory purchase for the A6, A8 and A31 upgrades. We did have a bit of a conversation there around that. Does anybody want to scope out any further information from that piece of correspondence? Or are you content to note at this moment in time?
Content to note, Chair.
Content to note? Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, Mark.
Sorry, Chair, just on that, I've difficulty opening it here, even though I had it open a wee minute ago. But it's, you know, does it distill it further in the terms of value of claims versus value of payments, if you know what I mean? Where the payments, how the payments eventually received by people who'd had land vested compared to the value of the claims that they had submitted.
Yeah, so you're looking to know, suppose, the differential.
Yeah.
Yeah. They mightn't be able to get a breakdown, I would imagine, of the individual figures, but they might be able to give us an overall.
They should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to? We can check that out. We can go back and just check that out. Yeah. Content with that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Is that for all roads, this? Or?
So that's for contained within this. So your A6, your A8 and your A31.
All the tables, fair enough.
Yeah. just to check out, you're content with that, Mark? Just check out in relation to all three of those?
Just there what we have, because that
Yeah.
has already been compiled, so it should be
Yeah.
easier to compute the detail that I've requested there.
Yeah. Yeah. Content, everyone? Yeah, okay. Page 39, you'll see a copy of the correspondence from the Association of British Insurers forward to the Committee for Infrastructure by the Committee for Finance. So are you content with that? Or if you want any further detail, are you content? Yeah. Sorry.
A bit more further detail, just I think this is quite relevant, so it is, especially the flooding. There's definitely with the flooding aspect of it. So yeah, I mean, it mentioned broader eligibility criteria, but there's different funds there between it finishes in 2039, and then certain houses built after certain times. So it just if there was further information, maybe that'd be good.
Further information on specifically
generally what more can be. What more can be done, or what more houses going to work in practice. Just conscious that there are areas in my constituency that have been flooded, and could be flooded again. So I just think it's important maybe to keep up to date with it, if that's okay.
Is it maybe worth it with the water flooding and sustainable drainage bill? Is it maybe worth asking how it may tie in with what might be contained within that? Because I think off the top of my head, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's an element in that whenever we looked at it first of all in relation to flood grants, I think, as well, wasn't there?
I think there was talk, but I think also the bill, obviously without the bill actually being introduced, we don't know what the bill will actually contain, but there could potentially be a linkage in and across that.
No, that's it, thank you.
Which would be coming to this committee as well to scrutinise.
So do you want to get that just checked out? Yeah.
Please.
Is that okay?
That's with the department,
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Content to move on then to the next correspondence? Yeah. Okay, page 46, you'll see correspondence from the Committee for Finance to all statutory committees, including Department for Finance monthly public expenditure outturn and forecast outturn information. So are you content to note? Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then page 95 is investing activity report.
Chair.
Sorry, Mark.
It's on the outturn and forecast.
Yeah.
Outturns there, and I think you'd actually raised this in the debate the other day.
Yeah.
I didn't catch it fully. Sorry, Chair, but it's in terms of the underspend on road maintenance of over £4 million because depreciation on the road network wasn't as bad as anticipated.
Yeah.
And could we get a further explanation of that? Does this mean that there was money allocated for road maintenance, for fixing potholes, that then wasn't spent, and we're being told that's because the roads aren't as bad or weren't as bad as we thought they would be, when it's painfully evident to anyone any day of the week that the roads are in a bad state? I think is pretty pretty much an understatement. Is this a case of the money having come too late through a monitoring round? And we'd raised concerns about this before in committee, or I know I certainly had, that then the work isn't able to be done.
Yeah, I'm going to bring in Phil here just.
Especially when we look at, sorry, Chair, the correspondence from the Quarry Product Association as well. Yeah.
I mean, certainly we could write to the department. Normally depreciation is non-cash, so it doesn't actually impact. It's more an accounting term under the Government Resources Act and reporting standards. But certainly we could clarify that point there. But I don't think it typically depreciation doesn't impact the actual cash available for departments. It's just, I suppose, a bit of headroom in the accounts to allow for the amount forecasted for depreciation, but certainly we said we could certainly clarify that point with the department.
Sorry, that's maybe I need to get more of an accounting head on. So then there's a road network somewhere, a fixed asset that depreciates year on year.
So essentially anything that is using capital money obviously is considered as an asset, and in annual accounts they obviously depreciate over time, and that needs to be sort of reflected in annual reports and accounts. So the depreciation aspect, even though it is on resource, it normally is non-cash. It doesn't actually take away physical, in this case 4.1 million, away from actual spending. It's more, I suppose, an accountancy line for the accounts, and because the depreciation wasn't as bad as forecast, therefore that's why it just shows an underspend on that accountancy line. But I do think it would be worthwhile getting clarity.
It's just, you know, then is there a fixed depreciation rate or how that forecast is done?
Because
on a yearly basis.
I take your point, Mark, because for me even as well, I seen it and I thought this is a bit mad, and it doesn't look great. So if we could get some clarity around that, I think that would be good, just for our own understanding, because obviously we'll have the budget session with officials coming up as well. So I think it wouldn't do any harm just to check in and get some clarity around it. Content? Yeah. Okay, and then we've noted the investing strategy for Northern Ireland. So moving on then quite nicely to page 115, which is a correspondence from the Mineral Products Association, providing a copy of their recent press release calling on the Minister for Infrastructure to carry out a review of funding allocations for transport and road asset management. So I'm just seeking agreement that we forward the press release to the Minister for comment and to find out whether the proposed funding allocations to transport and road asset management are being reviewed in advance of the equality assessment concluding on the 5th of June. So the Minister, I suppose in her answer that Mark alluded to there, did make mention of that in her oral answer to me in the chamber, but if we could just get that in writing as well, it wouldn't do any harm. You content?
Great, sure.
Then page 119, you'll see correspondence from a member of the public citing concerns about Department for Infrastructure in action with respect to the regularity of accidents at the junction between Ballymascaw and Winnie Hill roads. So as you know, the committee, we generally, when it's constituency based cases, we would usually refer the individuals to their local MLAs. Stephen?
Yes, no, thanks, Chair. Just, I suppose, just a wee bit of info on this. It's been a long-running issue for over 10, 12 years. Most people will be familiar with it. It's 5 minutes from this building, you know, and there is significant accident history on these two junctions, Kirkgantlet Crossroads, they're known as. So I suppose it's just interesting, this most recent accident, there's been quite a few on it, and you know, appreciate this lady is frustrated with the department lack of action, which I share that frustration. You know, it's a very significant road with high volumes of vehicles, and I do think it is time for action, but any action needs to be sympathetic to the area as well. You know, there was efforts made about 8 years ago about a scheme which was not sympathetic to the area, so I'm not sure what the best approach is. Appreciate it is a local issue, you know, and there's a precedent obviously with the committee, you know, and a policy that I suppose we could spend all committee meeting talking about everybody's local issues. Yeah. So I'm happy to whatever way you think.
What would you propose, or what would you like for the committee to consider as a action, I suppose, Stephen?
I know. Well, I personally think, you know, if we could forward this response on, or you know, this email corresponds to the Minister, you know, would do no harm on this occasion. But
yeah, sorry.
I mean, I know this particular stretch of road. Don't want to get kind of bogged down in terms of local casework issues as a committee. That's not our remit. Can we even just forward to the department? I mean, there were a number of Stephen's as Stephen's just said, there are multiple collisions taking place. There's photos. I looked at it on Google Maps as well. Looks pretty horrific there. Is there any way we can just pass it to the Minister's office and she could come back to us with anything? Because there's nothing really official there departmentally in terms of what their response would be. It's just email chains, but if we even just send it across. Yeah,
the department are well aware of it. You know, it's one of the major issues, you know, certainly locally. I think that would be helpful if we could.
Yeah, Cahill, you were looking in there.
Yeah, Chair, I don't disagree with that approach. I mean, clearly, if the department has been for a number of years aware of it, I would like to find out, maybe right even to council, local authorities, see what conversations there has been. If you're saying there's proposals or suggestions put to the floor, find out where, you know what I mean, because they will be part of the process.
Council has very little involvement in that. It's a pure DFI issue specifically.
No, it is, but any works, any schemes, any suggestions, local authority would be notified. You know what I mean? If you're saying that they would. Is there any feedback on that, the question, the reason why I'm asking the council is, why has it not gone past?
You know the council very well. I just don't think on this particular issue there's any merit in us writing to the council. But
I think it is purely a DFI issue, to be fair, Cathal, on this one, and maybe if we wait to see what the response is, it comes back to the committee.
Well, sure, I can't understand why it wasn't. If it's purely, I only say this because we all have it experiencing this year. Council notified no matter what it is, but all I'm saying. My question is, if this has gone on for 10 years and there has been a suggestion of a solution and now it's been torn down for some reason, it's been torn down for some reason not only by officials in the department or somebody else, but it certainly would have been engaged with local authority to get the feeling of the local people. That's all. That's the only reason we're saying that. But if you want to wait, because if we're writing to the minister and the department's going to come back with the same that they have done for a number of years in relation to the matter, we're going to then have to follow up again, where they have to accept the answer that's given to us. But Stephen knows better as there's their councillor. I would imagine there's been broader conversation about all this down through the years. I'm just trying to get a feel for, is it just solely a departmental issue where it's been torn down and non-accepted, or has there been conversations amongst the local people? There would have had been some conversation or some engagement with local authority and local councillors to see, they would have been asked what do they think. Maybe not. Maybe I don't know. But if it was up in the ABC area, that's the first thing would be. Doesn't matter if it's a major junction or not. The local authority, the local councillors would have engaged in the process. But listen, I'm happy enough to write to the minister. The issue for us, if we come back with the same answer, where we go again. So I would like to find out exactly more than just. But if Stephen, who was in the council, they know better that council has been engaged at all, that's 100%.
Clark, were you looking in there?
Yeah, just a couple of things, just to clarify. You want to raise it with the minister as opposed to writing to the department. So I know it seems like the same thing, but it's slightly different. Yeah, but you want to raise it with the minister.
Well, they're right. The department respond on behalf of the minister. That's it.
Yeah. So we could include in that letter what engagement they've had with the local authority, with the council, if members are content.
Yeah.
With that.
I'd like to find out what's going on.
Yeah.
So we're writing to the department and clarifying the engagement with the councils before we do anything further. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Content?
I'm just trying to get a better understanding as to why it hasn't moved on. That's all.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on. Page 127 is correspondence from Fermanagh and Omagh District Council requesting an oral evidence session to discuss the research findings of the Council's Rural Affairs Subcommittee. So obviously we'll just go back to the Council and acknowledge their invitation, and I'm thinking the best way to get more information in terms of what they want to discuss is ask them to provide us with written evidence first, because that will obviously help us in terms of our scheduling to understand what it is they actually want to discuss with us. Are you content with that?
Right.
Okay, page 158, you'll see the clerk's memo providing a summary of responses received from the local authorities to a committee request for information on how each council has regard to the model licence conditions in the operation of council-owned caravan sites and actions taken by them in respect of unauthorised use of council-owned car parks. It was a wee while ago that we heard from in terms of model licensing, but if you'll remember, the councils aren't subject to this, so that's what we were trying to ascertain from the councils is what level it marries up, I suppose, with the model licence conditions that are coming forward from a DFI point of view, which would affect the private caravan sites. So members, are you content with what we have been provided with, or is there any other information that you want to seek out from any other council areas or DFI in relation to this? You content? Okay.
Just on that one, sorry, Chair, I noticed Origin North Down was missing from that. Was there any reason around that?
They just haven't responded. We can.
We're waiting on Carol's next letter.
we can chase that
council
up.
doesn't engage anybody.
It is.
Council doesn't engage.
It is a.
Sure, right to the council and ask why they're not engaging.
It is an issue, caravans within the, the Ards North Town Council area. So it would be interesting to see, an update from them on that.
Well, look, we can chase them up again.
I mean, just sort of following on from what Mr. Dunn said, I think it was acknowledged that sort of the overnight sort of on council ground was an issue. Now, it did say in the Clerk's memo that they're trying to engage with their own bylaws, but I'm just wondering, is there any scope? Just mentioning that it does seem to be an issue, and again, just to acknowledge what Mr. Dunn said there,
Yeah.
But anyway, but I'm sure they're trying to deal with it themselves. But.
And just Chair, with your permission, we've chased both those councils up quite a lot. It's highly unusual for us to get replies.
We shouldn't write the councils, Mega. According to Stephen, what were you chasing them up for?
I couldn't possibly comment. No, if members want to write to councils, I'm sure they're within their rights to do so. No, it's just that we have followed up a few times. We can, if members want, for us to follow them up again, but it would be unusual for us to get replies from all councils usually.
Yeah. So what?
No, Chair. I mean, we've said this, and even previous to this committee, it's out for consultation and response, and it's up to whatever stakeholder is engaged in it should respond. Sometimes that doesn't happen, but I would imagine in this case, if it was relevant to the area and a major issue, they should respond. That's the only reason we engage with councils and that.
Well, maybe we can reflect. We could maybe reflect when we're chasing up again that it has been raised at the committee that this is a major issue for the particular council area, and see if that maybe prompts a response in relation to that. If you're content with that approach, yeah. Okay, so you're content with all the other items of correspondence. There's nothing else that anybody wants to raise at this moment in time. Okay, thank you. So we're now moving on to our SL1. So item 7 is SL1, the Climate Change Road Traffic, the Vehicle Emissions Trading Scheme Amendment Order 2025. So at page 178, you'll see the SL1 proposal for the statutory rule. At page 181, you'll see departmental briefing on legislative amendments in 2025 to the Vehicle Emissions Trading Schemes Order. The rule will be subject to negative resolution procedure and is required to be laid before the Assembly in draft as a draft order in Council. The purpose of the order is to address a discrepancy between intended target methodology and the target methodology resulting from a strict reading of the Vehicles Emission Trading Schemes Order 2023, which currently only allows UK data to be used in setting emissions targets. Resolving this discrepancy would ensure the stringency of such targets will not be impacted by UK's exit from the EU. There was a question that I had in my head, maybe I am just not reading this right, but I just wanted to maybe just check out if we can get figures from the department in terms of what this will mean in terms of the NI targets and what the differential is between the two methodologies and what that will mean in terms of targets. Does that seem reasonable? Yeah? Okay, was there anything else anybody wanted to raise? So are members content with the proposal for the statutory rule? Content. Okay, thank you. Item 8 is SL1, the Belsize Garden, Belsize Way, Lisburn Abandonment Order Northern Ireland 2025. At page 189, the SL1 proposal for the statutory rule. At page 189, map for the proposal for the statutory rule. The rule will be subject to negative resolution procedure. The purpose of the rule will be to abandon 2 areas of land totalling 340.76 square metres, comprising a turning head measuring 165.92 square metres adjacent to number 9 Belsize Gardens, Lisburn, and a turning head measuring 174.84 metres structures adjacent to number 3 Belsize Way, Lisburn, after completion of such works as the department considers necessary to provide alternative facilities for road traffic. The abandonment has been requested by Blue Horizons Developments Limited to facilitate the second phase of development at the site. The provision of the turning heads was a planning requirement associated with the first phase of the development. However, neither will be required when phase 2 has been completed. A new road layout will be adopted under the private streets order when the necessary construction works are completed. So are members content with the proposal for the statutory rule? Content? Yeah. Okay, thank you. We now have our subordinate legislation. SR is not subject to assembly procedure. So advise members there are 3 statutory rules that are not subject to assembly proceedings and are not required to be laid. These are pages 191 to 237 of the meeting pack. And they are the SR 2025-97, the Parking and Waiting Restrictions Belfast Order Northern Ireland 2025, SR 2025-98, the Waiting Restrictions Castle Rock Order Northern Ireland 2025, and the SR 2025-99, the Parking Places Disabled Persons Vehicle Amendment Number 3 Order Northern Ireland 2025. So members, are you content to note the statutory rules?
Yeah.
Okay. Item 10 is subordinate legislation. SL1 is not subject to assembly procedure. So there are 7 proposals for the statutory rules that are not subject to assembly proceedings and are not required to be laid. These can be found at pages 242 to 266 of the meeting pack, and they are the SL1, the road raises Garn Point Hill Climb Order Northern Ireland 2025, the SL1, the road races Down Rally Order Northern Ireland 2025, the SL1, the road races Ulster Rally Order Northern Ireland 2025, the SL1, the road races Armoy Motorcycle Road Race Order Northern Ireland 2025, SL1, the loading bays on roads Amendment Number 3 Order Northern Ireland 2025, SL1, the loading bays on roads Order Northern Ireland 2025, and the SL1, the road races Bushwhacker Rally Order Northern Ireland 2025.
It's the best one, Chair, by the Bushwhacker Rally.
Great name. So are you content, members? Yeah. Okay, so we'll now move on to our forward work programme. At page 272, you'll see the draft forward work programme. At page 275, you'll see the Clerk's memo, which is committee strategic planning. And at page 279, the Committee for Infrastructure Strategic Plan 2024-2025. So members, I had just asked, obviously we'll be coming up to recess, so I felt that maybe this is a time to take a wee bit of a stock take on what we have done so far, and then to start planning for once we come back after the summer. So members, you may have had a look at this. If not, take a reflect on it, and we can maybe come back to this next week. Or again, if there are any briefings that you would like to follow up on or hear back on, or if there's any other items that you would like to be considered in terms of our forward work programme going forward. Does anybody want to say anything just in relation to that at this moment in time?
Sure, you on 275?
Yeah.
I would just like to say, see this Northern Ireland water stuff, we need to keep a better and maybe more of an eye on this, because the narrative out there is agriculture. I'm not going to get into the NAP debate, but there's a narrative out there, and from what I took from that Greenmount discussion was farmers are willing to have a conversation, but the fingers have been pointed solely on them. I was at a site yesterday morning that was road services doing work and raw sewage running straight into the river.
Yeah.
So there's a problem there. Mm-hmm. So that septic tank, it's NA water, it's broadly. Mm-hmm. I think everybody needs to come together and collectively agree what they're doing instead of just pointing the finger at one. So I think we need to look more at NA water, what they're planning to do with this sewage issue. Mm-hmm. And we did ask the question, if you recall, NAEA, with the 12% of septic tanks, what are you going to do to solve the 12%? They don't have staff to do it.
Yeah.
So NA water is not doing much. NAEA is doing nothing, according to those 12% issues, but agriculture is going to get destroyed. Everybody needs to be part of the solution, to be fair.
So what would be your proposal, I suppose, for this committee in terms of how we take it forward?
More into NA water. We need to get our heads together and say, right, NA water, what's the plan for 26, 27, 28, 29?
So sorbet arrangements, you'll be aware of that.
Yeah.
So obviously we had been asking around the timescales of that, because that was to go out to consultation, I understand off the top of my head. So we might need to just maybe check in relation to the timescales of that, maybe. Would that be relevant to do that, just to check in, because that might give us scope again to check as to what's going to happen around those arrangements. Because as I see it, that allows NI Water special dispensation to just pollute the waterways. So I think it might be good just to look into that element of it, Keith, if that makes sense. You know, because then that would allow our committee to try and because it is DAERA, perhaps going forward, obviously we'll need to see the outworkings of that. We'll obviously need to engage with NI Water around all of that as well in terms of sorbet arrangements, but it might also be worthwhile having another joint meeting with the committee on that. I don't know, but Cahill, you were looking in.
Okay, Keith, it's an interesting point, Keith, but Chair, we have our own responsibilities, so we need to stick to them, which is fine, but we need to work with stakeholders and partners, and in this case, for this issue, we definitely need to work with DAERA, because there's no point in us operating in isolation ourselves, trying to move our part forward, like NIW responsible with sorbet, and then there's an issue, there's a blockage on the other side. So, and I'm not saying that the joint committee, which is tried the other day, we've tried, whether it needs some more engagement, it's nearly as bad as departments operating in isolation, you know, in their own silos. We as committees have our own responsibility. But for some of the subjects, if we're serious about addressing some of the issues, we need to tie in more, rather than just say it's you. Certainly legislation we have to do ourselves, it's our own committee responsibility. But let's try and tie this in. I mean, Keith's mentioned, and you've mentioned some stuff with sorbet, with NEA was mentioned the other day. So if we're serious about, because it's our major priority, one of our major priorities, NAW, let's try when we come back to look at see how we can work across the committees to try and address. But there's no point in us moving forward our part, and there's a blockage on the other side which holds the whole thing up. That's all I'm saying to you. So probably better partnership working maybe. Yeah.
Well, that's why I'm saying that there's a couple of different elements to NI Water. We're obviously with the Fiscal Council on the sustainability of water coming up. We are going to have the forensic accountant. We'll have the briefing in relation to that as well, and then obviously we'll be looking at the water flood and sustainable drainage bill coming up. We'll have elements in relation to that will be obviously NI Water focused, and then we will need to check in relation to sorbet arrangements to find out what the time scale is in relation to that. So Keith, are you content with that? Just that we check in a first basis. I can't quite remember off the top of my head. I know we did ask in relation to the timescales around that, but we can check that out, and that may then help inform us in terms of where we go on that particular issue going forward, if you're content.
Yep.
Okay, anything else that members want to raise at this stage on that? We can come back to it if members have anything else.
Yeah, Chair, obviously, we had a meeting last week, the importance of the primary legislation. Yeah. We need to move it. Come back September, we have 18 months and then that's it. So it's going to be under severe pressure for all, any of the parts that because we run out of time. So there's 3 bills you've mentioned them there, so let's push on with them.
No, absolutely. Okay, and then I'm just seeking agreement for the clerk to schedule evidence sessions as set out in the to be scheduled section of the forward work programme. You'll see there that there's a list there of evidence sessions that we still just have to schedule, so the clerk will schedule those out for whenever we are coming back in the autumn time. And then just seeking agreement that we proceed with the evidence sessions as set out in the draft forward work programme and reflect any decisions taken today. There may be just some changes to the forward work programme as we try and move some things about, but we will keep members aware of that going forward. Content?
So just one other thing quickly.
Yeah.
The potential visits there and to see the wastewater treatment plant. I mean, is there anything else? Listen, maybe as we thought, certainly the wastewater, the water errands. So I see, is there any other, was there anything else, or that's it for now,
Yeah.
Potential visits, yeah.
So I suppose we're trying to schedule those to tie in with the work of the committee, so that we are not just going out to visit and
No,
do you know what I
100%.
mean?
I mean, it's just
So it's scheduling those to coincide with some of the work that we're going to do.
Yeah, they're just visits that have been agreed by the committee
That's okay, I'm
in the
just
past.
checking, mate.
But so we will factor those in when it works according to the work plan of the committee, if that's okay.
I would reach out to Northern Ireland Water on that. About, I think it was Keith. Did you raise that, Kinniger? To check out.
What cost was going to be included to upgrade it?
Aye.
Yeah, because obviously PSNA has purchased that. That's out there now. Yeah, we had asked that question.
In terms of the cost, rather than the us going out for a meeting.
No. The cost. My question was at the time. Kinniger's not big enough, apparently.
Yeah.
The capacity of the site. What's the cost going to be to upgrade that? My concern is in the policing board as well. Peter, I think we talked about it. Who's going to pay for that?
Okay, we'll check that out. All right. Content then to move forward, yeah?
Yep.
Okay. Item 12 is any other business. So does anybody have any other items of business they want to raise at this moment in time? Okay, so just before we move into closed session, the next meeting will take place at 10 a.m. next week, 11th of June, here in room 29, Parliament Building. So I'm just seeking agreement to, before we move into closed session, seeking agreement that we allow the Departmental Assembly Liaison Officer to remain for the closed session on Reservoirs. Content?
Right.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'll now move into closed session. Thank you.